question, like, in your opinion, like, what do you think God is? Because, like, everyone calls him a him, but he's not a him, if that makes any sense.
Why is he not a him?
Because he's not, like, part of the human, like, race, or, like, he's not, it's hard to, he's not a thing. I mean,
Are we, what's the question? The question, what is God? And then your friend next to you said, but there's no evidence. So are you asking that as well? The question of evidence, or are you just questioning what is the Jewish concept of God? Both. Okay. So it's a great question, and it's not just. So I'm even going to expand your question further. So you say, you know, Jewish tradition, and by the way, most monotheistic traditions talk about God as a him, but they also use all kinds of other language to describe God. You know, merciful, kind, vengeful. God having an outstretched arm when he split the sea. God has an arm, right? There's all this kind of language that if you accept the Torah is God's words, God articulating himself, then God is himself describing himself that way. So it's a great question. What is the Jewish definition of God? And then we can touch on the issue of evidence later. In essence, and this actually is why everyone really can't really deny the concept of God if you take this definition, is the original substance from which all other substances came from. Okay? That's the first principle. Now, anyone, whether they're religious or not, believer or not, surely accepts there's an original substance from which everything else is created from. The question is this an intelligent substance? Is this a substance with a being, with a personality, with a plan, right? So that's the first step in terms of God. Judaism says that God is an intelligent being, a personal being, with a plan and a purpose for the world. So then you ask the question of, well, how can we describe God as being a he? How can you use any language at all really to describe something that is non-finite, that is infinite? So I'd actually turn the question back on itself and say, well, hold on one second. God says, it says at the beginning of the Torah that man is created in God's image, right? Meaning that we are a reflection of him, okay? So when people say, he can't be described in any human terms, he can't be described in any earthly, worldly terms. Well, one second, if we're created in his image, that means that we're reflecting him. So actually, the Jewish approach would be to say, you say that God has an arm, and people say that's metaphorical. Actually, the truth is, we are the metaphor. Our arm is the metaphor. Our arm is the pretend arm, the arm, so to speak. The real arm is God's arm, which is a spiritual arm. It's a non-finite arm. You know, my arm can wave about things in the air. His arm can split a sea. My love only has so much capacity. His love is infinite. My heart can only take so much pain. He can experience infinite amounts of pain. So actually, it's completely the other way around. So when people say, you can't describe him in human terms, hold on, who created this world? Who created all the concepts that we know? And who told us that we're in his image? So actually, it's completely the reverse. It's 180. And so when people say, you can't use any language to describe God, he's completely undescribable, then actually you might as well be an atheist. Because if you're saying there's nothing I can say about him, there's nothing I can possibly use to describe him, to understand him, well then I'm completely stuffed. There's no possible relationship I could have with someone. It's only by knowing about someone, it's only by someone telling me about them that I can get to know them. And that's what Judaism is about. And that, by the way, is what the upcoming holiday of Shavuot is about, which is coming this week, where God introduces himself and he gives us the Torah, which is him. The first word at Mount Sinai, God says, is Anochi, which means I. I am God. I am your God who took you out of Egypt. And the rabbis tell us that you can take apart the word Anochi as an acronym to read, I am giving you my soul in written form, which is the Torah. The Torah is God's soul described, him describing himself to us. And without it, we wouldn't really know who he is and what we know about him. But through all these things, we get to understand him. So the question of describing himself as a he, So how can he be a he? Well, he created concepts of male and female. So Judaism actually, by the way, does say, the deeper mystics and commentaries tell us, that God actually, it's true, has both male and female elements. Okay, he's neither male nor female, but he does choose for us to be in relationship with him, for us to see him as the he, and for us as human beings to be the she. He determined that that was the way, the best, the healthiest dynamic to have in relationship with him. And so in the Torah, I'll get to your question in a sec. In the Torah, he describes himself as a he. So when people say, well, how can you say he's he? Well, that's how he chooses to identify. It's not for me to, that's how he's chosen to be. And so what happened at Mount Sinai, the rabbis describe as like a marital event. It was a marriage that took place between the Jewish people and God. And the Jewish people were considered the bride, and God was considered the groom. And so basically all the terms we have for understanding God, this being that created the world, that's outside the universe, infinite, all these things, all the terms we have, the tools we have to get to know him, which is the whole project of Judaism, is given to us through the Torah. The other question is a question of evidence. So I'll just touch on this because I do want to be able to allow for everyone to get their questions in. And this is something that I can't really deal with in 2 minutes in a comprehensive way, but I'll just touch on it. Judaism does not accept the premise that faith should be something without evidence, okay? Why would God create us with intellectual faculties and then say dismiss them entirely in terms of understanding the most important tenets of Judaism and the nature of the world? So the word for faith in Judaism is emunah. And faith would be a mistranslation. If faith means belief despite a lack of evidence, Judaism would not accept that premise. That's just, I might as well believe in the tooth fairy. So the real word, the real translation for emunah in English would be faithfulness, which means, am I going to be faithful to what I know is true? So Judaism says you can find plenty of evidence, plenty of compelling evidence for God. The question is, are you going to be faithful to that? And people say, if someone says to me, well, what do you mean? Of course I'm going to be faithful to what I know to be true. Really? I could know that eating loads of junk food is bad for me, but I could be persuaded not, to keep going and eat loads. I could know that humanity seems to have a brilliant capacity to do all kinds of things they know is destructive, but they'll do it anyway because we have within us other impulses, other drives. We have the ability to rationalize nonsense in our heads. And God gave us those things in order to give us the free will. But Judaism does not say you can't know. And as I was saying earlier, the whole purpose and project of Judaism is knowledge of him, knowledge of God. And part of that is evidence. In terms of evidence, I'll just touch on them very briefly again. For me, what I find compelling is, number one, from a scientific perspective, we now know that the universe had a beginning. That wasn't the case for thousands of years. Philosophers thought that the universe has always been here. So if it's always been here, you don't need a creator. If now that we know, we have the Big Bang proposition, we know that the universe is expanding, meaning if you were to rewind the tapes, the universe would have had a start. The question is, every effect has a cause, right? There's cause and effect. So what was the cause that created the effect of the Big Bang? Well, it had to have been something outside of the finite limitations of the universe, right? Because is it more logical, is it more scientific to say that something was created by nothing? That flies in the face of cause and effect principle. So I don't think it's irrational or unscientific to say that it makes more sense to say something outside of the universe caused the universe to begin. That's a scientific issue. Second thing for me that I find particularly compelling is the story of Jewish history and how it chimes with the Torah's prophetic vision for how Jewish history would manifest, which we know has existed in written form for over 2,000 years. And it very clearly says the Jewish people are going to be scattered throughout the world, intensely persecuted, few in number. And despite all those things, they will survive and they'll dramatically change the world's values, which we've seen happen. And was something that I actually focused my university dissertation on, the impact of the Hebrew Bible on the world's value system. Values like the sanctity of human life, dignity of the individual, education as a human right, family values, world peace as an ideal, social responsibilities to the poor and the needy, were not articulated by the other pillars of Western civilization, Greece and Rome. It actually came from the Hebrew Bible, which then manifested in later the offshoots and children of Judaism like Christianity, but it was clearly there and articulated there at the start. And then you have this remarkable relationship the Jewish people have with the land of Israel, where they were there, it flourished 2,000 years ago, they're exiled and dispersed, and then 2,000 years later they return and the land flourishes again. So all of this is a remarkable story, and it was all clearly articulated and prophesied in this Torah document, which we've had for thousands of years. To me, that also points towards a divine orchestration, a divine... it's more compelling to say that someone, a being unbound by time, would prophesy such things, because these things that occurred in Jewish history, there's no precedent for. So if it was man-made, who would have written these things? Who would have been able to make such guesses when there's no precedent to base it on? So there are other examples as well, other things that I'd say I find particularly compelling. I'm a very logical person. I wouldn't believe in something or dedicate my life to, my work to, my life vision for, if I didn't think it was intellectually compelling. But just the principle of does Judaism believe in blind faith? No, it doesn't. It says you can use your intellectual faculties, but then the question is, are you going to be loyal to that?
Hi, thank you so much for watching. To watch another one, click here. To stay up to date with all our content, click here to subscribe. And if you're able to, you can help support JTV to grow and grow by clicking join below this video, where you can become a member and get perks including early access to videos and private live discussions with me. But most of all, you'll be partnering with us on our mission to change the world.